So it's almost unfathomable to think that we are astrologically describable, that we are mathematically determinable. We come in here and the entire universe can be mathematically described, explained, and the entire reality that we are experiencing fits together inside of those equations. And astrology allows for us to knit that together and have an understanding of what is happening and approach it from even an intellectual standpoint. Welcome back to the Art of Awakening podcast, where the art of living awake becomes a daily practice. I'm your host, Dr. Sue Morter, and today we have a very special guest, Vish Chatterji. After a successful career as an engineer, executive, and an entrepreneur, Vish began honoring a deeper calling, bridging Eastern wisdom and Western leadership through his work and as an executive coach, a Vedic teacher, and a founder of Head and Heart Insights. He's the author of The Business Casual Yogi, I love that, and Astrology Decoded, the Secret Science of India's Sages. Vish, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Thank you for having me here. Greetings to everybody who's watching. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Yes, indeed. So just to let you guys know, I know many of you know our student and now colleague and dear friend of mine, Geraldine Glass. Vish has come to us through Geraldine. So we already know that he is plugged into the kinds of things that you're going to love to hear about. And I've had an opportunity to review a little bit about this man, and I know that you're going to love what he has to say. So, I'd love to begin a little bit with your journey, because you came from a world that many people would desire as highly, the thing to do, right? The place to become, the ultimate pinnacle of life, and many would describe it as highly analytical and structured, and engineering and business and leadership, all of that, and yet there's clearly a deeper unfolding happening inside of your world underneath it all. So what was the turning point where you realized that success on the outside was, not what you were interested in altogether? It wasn't enough, that something deeper was calling you?
Yeah, I grew up in Hong Kong. So my early childhood was in Hong Kong when it was a British colony. But my mother and father were from India. So we had a very kind of East meets West household, you could say. We followed Hindu tradition. My dad was a yogi. He practiced yoga every morning, and then he put on his suit, went off to work. And so I grew up sort of understanding the Indian tradition as a householder and in a cultural context, you could say. But then, Hong Kong was the dark business suit, tie, go out, like money making. That was kind of the main focus. And so I always had a vision as an adult. I wanted to be successful as a leader and wear a dark suit and tie and go to work every day. And so I did the whole track of going down the engineering route, became an engineer. Then I did my MBA, went into executive management, and I got to wear that suit and tie every day to work when I worked in the auto industry. But even though I was sort of rising up the ranks of the corporate world, getting recognition as a good leader, as a good executive, I always maintained a yoga and meditation practice every morning before I went to work. It was just sort of one of those non-negotiables. And at the time, I understood it to be a way to develop myself better, be a better executive, be a better leader, deal with stress. These are very, very high stress jobs. Finding a way to just stay grounded through it. But it wasn't until I reached, you could say, the pinnacle of my executive career. I was on an executive team of a large publicly traded company, and we just quintupled the stock price of the company. And the CEO called me into his office after we'd had all the success. He said, "Vish, you've done a tremendous job." And I thought, I think this is when I'm going to get promoted. So I'm sort of sitting there in the back of my mind saying, this is my next big, boost in life. And he said, when we have our meetings, there's no need to challenge things anymore. He did all the challenging that was good. That's got us to where we are now. But now, just sort of like, let's just kind of, come in at 9 o'clock, leave at 5. We don't have to push so hard. And I said, what do you mean? What are you telling me what to do? And as I asked more questions, I started to learn he was asking me to be more of a yes man. And I had, heard that. I'd heard that sort of rumor that, to get ahead, you have to be the yes person. But now I was literally being asked directly to do that. And I thought, this is just not who I am. This is just fundamentally not aligned, like something in my soul is saying, this is not it. And within a couple of days, I submitted my resignation. I said, look, I'm not right for this. I'm going to do something else. And I thought entrepreneurship was the path. It was I'm in California, the startup world. Maybe I need to start a business on my own. I'd done it within companies. So I partnered with somebody that I knew very well, who's a business guy, and we created a startup. And the startup ended up being an incredible learning experience. But from that, I discovered that I'm just not wired for that world.
Mm.
And so that was sort of when I had a bit of a wake up call to do something on my own, but that was more in line with my spiritual heritage.
I have to say that ultimately that's what everyone is going to have to do in their lives in some form or another. At some point, we will come to a place where we recognize that, I can play by the rules. I can do this thing. I can stay in the box. I can, do what the Joneses did, do what my neighbors did, do what my parents did, whatever it may be, do what the cultural norm would say, do what tradition would say. And at the end of the day, if it's not fulfilling our destiny, if it's not really speaking to why we came, what we're doing here, then, it begins to become obvious. And I actually think that a lot of people suffer because they're not realizing that that's the point that they're at in their lives, that they're at this choice point and they don't really realize that that's what is before them. So I just really appreciate hearing what you're sharing. I went through something similar,
Right.
and mine involved family and business as well. So there's
Right.
another layer to, how
Yeah.
do you let go? How do you reinvent? How do you allow this to be okay for it to not be okay anymore, right? How do we move forward? Inside of you, what would you say happened that allowed you to just have that realization before you wrote the letter of resignation? But as that decision was happening in you, can you describe anything mentally, emotionally, physiologically that was happening inside your system that would allow people to recognize, okay, here's some of the stuff that happens when you're up against one of these moments?
I mean, it's so deep down inside because you feel like you're wired a certain way, but you're actually not wired that way, right? So you have your family conditioning, your family programming, you have your own self-programming, you go through your education system, you go through society, and you look around you and everybody's doing the same thing, and you're like, that's what I'm supposed to do. In fact, I'm wired to do that, I think, right?
Right.
But then something happens, and in the yoga tradition, it's sort of a wake up moment. It's almost like the curtain gets lifted, and you take a peek behind, and you're like, oh my God, there's something else, and the curtain comes back down. So you have this moment, like a flash of a moment where like everything just feels wrong. Like it's almost like you get a glance behind the curtain. You get a glance of the illusion that you've been living your whole life, and it's very disconcerting because
Yeah.
if you see that instinct and you feel that feeling, your whole life is going to change. And so it's scary.
Mhm.
So you quickly close it. But it's this feeling like deep in you could say deep in your soul, deep in your gut, deep in your chakra system, energetically, something just feels gross. It just doesn't feel right. And I think many of us can overcome that feeling and continue down the path of misery, right? Or find ways to just subtly make a shift, but not really honor that true feeling. So for me, it was years of just not feeling quite aligned after that moment where I tried the startup route to see if that would satisfy it. But it wasn't until I really went deeper into my calling, which has been to be a spiritual coach, to be a spiritual guide, that I finally said, okay, I've arrived where I'm supposed to be. And now that you feel like you live a different way, you see the world in a different way, and you see other people who aren't living that way, and you're like, oh, that's okay. That's just the way the world is. Some of us bubble out of it, and some of us don't. But I think in your body. I think your body is doesn't really lie. It's our mind. It's our mind that can convince us of anything, and push us into places where it's not really suitable. But you have achievements from it, right? I got good degrees. I went to great universities. I got an engineering degree. I had an MBA. I had incredible positions of power in the corporate world. So it does deliver to you some things, but that material satisfaction at the end of the day doesn't really satisfy, right?
Yeah, it's not fulfilling.
Yeah.
Achievement, it there's a certain level of it that is very satisfying, and yet there's something deeper still that ultimately has to be tapped. It's why we come. It's why we're actually here. And
And
so,
you don't want to discover that on your deathbed.
Yeah, right. I
right?
always say that we're all going to figure this out. It might be in the last 5 minutes of our lives, but we are going to figure it out. We are going to have what is aligned and true, and we're going to let go of what we don't need to be holding on to, and we're going to allow for something to emerge and to surface that is destined to emerge and surface through us. And we don't want it to be the last 5 minutes of our lives. If we can help it, we'd like it to be now, so that we're living in this, in this moment, in alignment with what is truly meant to be for us. So, what was the time frame between you recognizing that first glimpse and you being able to be in the place that you are now? What is it's the period
Probably
of?
about three, yeah, about 3 years. Took about 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So I had that moment, and at that time, I probably could have made the switch, but I said, let's do the startup. The startup is the calling. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to build a company and sell it for $50 million. Like that was my goal, my dream, and that sort of obscured a little bit. Gave me. It's almost like it just delayed the inevitable. And the startup journey, of course, taught me a lot about how to run a business, how to start a business, how to raise capital, all of the things that many people try to do that I now coach in my work. So, in a way, it was a training ground. But the beautiful thing was because I was in a startup, I had a lot of flexibility to explore other things. And this is when people started coming to me and asking me, Vish, you've had all this great experience. Would you consider coaching me? And I thought, I have no idea what coaching is, but sure, I'm an entrepreneur. I'll coach, sure. And then the person would say, my boss needs to just, review what it is that you offer. So I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll have a website ready tomorrow. And so I'd stay up all night, build a little quick website, and here's my coaching website. And then, then the person would start getting coaching from me. And I was getting referrals, like people referring me to other people to coach them. And I thought, this coaching thing, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying coaching. I'm actually quite miserable in the startup. What if I just switch into coaching altogether? And I enrolled at UC Berkeley in their executive coaching program, which it's part of the coaching institute. It's part of the business school there, but it is a spiritual institution in disguise, I will say, because I went to that program, and in that training, I had quite the wake up. This was my calling. This is what I'm here to do. I realized the coaching I'd been doing prior was not coaching at all. so, so I'd just been making up as I went. It wasn't really coaching. I learned what coaching really was, and it was recognizing the wisdom in the coachee, recognizing the talent, the light, the wisdom in them, and being a facilitator and guide of that wisdom awakening process. And so in that process, I say, this is who I am. And they ask the question, well, what makes you unique as a coach? And that's when I discovered this idea that I'm an East meets West coach. I grew up in an East meets West world. I've studied my MBA and my engineering, but I'm spiritually trained. I've done, 20 years of yoga and meditation practice. I can combine the yoga wisdom with the MBA wisdom and bring them together as an East meets West coach. Everything that I saw in leadership development in the corporate world, I saw reflected in the yoga sutras, in the yoga shastras, in the texts of yoga, that this was a system of personal development, personal improvement, and it can be particularly applied into leadership. And so let me bring the yoga teachings into the business world. And that's sort of where that emerged.
Beautiful. Actually, they're the original, coaching, and truly personal development and spiritual development writings. That's how far back it goes. And when we're drawing upon them directly, we keep it clear. It remains unaltered and undisturbed and undistorted, because the truth is the truth is the truth. And no matter what we've come up with in our modern times, or in the millennia between the time they were written and the time that we sit here today, no matter what kind of entanglements we create or generate, the truth is still the truth is still the truth of who we are, and that infinite potential that we are made of. It's not something that we possess or that we have access to. It's truly our existence. And so we were speaking just briefly about the Vedic literature and these ancient teachings just before we got started here on our in our interview today. What I find is that people are deeply interested in returning again to what the ancient teachings have to offer, and in a sort of, let me put it all together kind of way for themselves. Like they're wanting to know what are our roots? Where do we come from? What is it that I can depend upon that will carry me through these amazing times that we are living in today? And so, what can you share from your perspective? What is actually happening collectively right now that is really encouraging people back toward these ancient teachings themselves?
Well, it's interesting because we're all collectively going through that feeling that something doesn't feel right, right? We're all having this feeling in our body that something doesn't feel right and there must be something more. So the gift of this time is that it's causing lots of people to really wake up. It's causing a lot of people to take a peek behind that curtain and realize, wait, there's more here. So you could say this is a time, whenever there's darkness, there's light, right? They always go hand in hand. And so this is a time where people are waking up to light and saying, wait a minute, there's something more to the world that meets the eye. There's something more to me that meets the eye. And so I think people are looking for that spiritual understanding now. And, you know, from astrologer point of view, I mean, I'm a Vedic astrologer now. Is a lot of the work I do is from the astrology world. I pulled a Vedic astrology chart for the moment we started our conversation today, Dr. Sue. And there's no randomness in the universe, right? Like anything is an omen. Somebody walks in front of you and wears a certain type of clothing, that's an omen that reveals something. So the moment that we started our conversation, I pulled a Vedic astrology chart for the moment to see, hey, what's going to happen in our conversation? To try and predict. And at the moment that we started the conversation here where I'm sitting in Redondo Beach, California, the sign of Cancer, the actual zodiac stars of Cancer, are rising on the eastern horizon. And so that is already a sign of nourishment. People are looking for some kind of spiritual nourishment. They want to feel held, they want to feel nurtured, they want to feel understood. So whatever your situation is in life right now, you need to be held, you need to be understood, you need to be nurtured. And that nurturing force can come from the divine, it can come from another human being, it can come from yourself. So I'd say that's the first sort of takeaway, that no matter what time you're in, now is a time to find a way to take care of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. And the moon at the moment, and this is the Vedic astrology calculations, is the actual observable position. The moon is in the sign of Aquarius, which is about humanity. And it is located, from my perspective, in the 8th house, which is the house of the occult, the secrets, the yoga tradition, the occult traditions, astrology, Ayurveda, mind, body medicine, all of those energetic systems. So the message is to learn in this time to take care of yourself, but leverage the hidden teaching, leverage the hidden teachings of the universe, leverage all of those sort of hidden, occult, alternative, quote unquote, secret systems to take care of yourself through this time. And if you're not doing that, you will be left behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is right up my alley. I just wrote a book that we just published a few weeks ago, and it got met with quite a reception. It made the New York Times and the USA Today and all these, Publishers Weekly and internationally as well. Hitting number one on some of these charts, and it's called The Anatomy of Awakening. And I had no idea that we would actually make it to that level of awareness out in the world. But it is truly because there is a massive desire for people to understand who they are, and a massive desire for people in our community to help other people learn that as well. And so, they're leaning in and helping facilitate people to have access to these teachings. And, just watching all of that happen has been just such a grace-filled moment, because it allows us to recognize that we do know, we are taking action. This is happening. We're not stopping. This unfoldment is unfolding, this revealing of this deeper truth of who we are. And so I love that what you're sharing as well is that we can be an entrepreneurial mindset and still be deeply seated in consciousness, in deep in ancient truths and in cosmic realities at the same time. Because there was a time where people had to give up one to have the other. And I feel that we are evolving to a place where we don't have to give up our ability to be successful, to be clear, to be engaging, to assert in the world in order to also, we don't have to give that up in order to be in touch with the deep stillness within and the deep truths that we reside within that guide our unfoldment in our own evolution in a deep and meaningful way. And I feel that we're here at this place where the both and is this moment for us where we can be both. We can be deeply conscious and deeply awakened and deeply illuminated and asserting ourselves in the world and not having to, seclude ourselves into the ashram, if you will, but that we can bring those teachings out into everyday walking, talking life, right?
Dr. Sue, first of all, congratulations on just an incredible launch.
Oh,
That is an
thank
incredible
you.
achievement, and the timing is just perfect. And the word awakening is literally what has to happen at this time, and you're a
Yes.
guide into that. So I spent a lot of time in ashrams. I spent a lot of time in the Himalayas in India. I've spent times in caves and tents with babas and rishis and sadhus. And there is a place to do that too. There is a place for somebody, depends on your chart, depends on your dharma, depends on what your path is. For some, they need to go and recluse from the world. Very few, but they recluse from the world and they do their internal practice. What I've seen in ashrams is a lot of people running away from responsibility. They have work to do in the world and they've run away and they've used the ashram as an escape. So they're reclusive, but not for the right purpose. But the work has to be done for many of us, and this is definitely for you and for I think many of your listeners, that you have work to do in this world to improve the world's consciousness. So your spiritual sadhana, your spiritual practice is to do your spiritual work, but to heal and help and do something in this world with it. Not every guru goes and hides in a cave. Many gurus are out in the world doing work and helping others. And so in that case, you have to balance the spiritual practice and your own spiritual development with sharing, teaching, raising consciousness, and doing something about this world. This world is still for many people it's the crucible in which we do our spiritual work, right? And so it depends on your unique thing, but I think a lot of people confuse spirituality with escapism and running away and hiding, but really the work is here in the world. And so you do your practices, and as you do your practices, as you go deeper, I believe that there are beings that are noticing, right? There are beings that are noticing, wow, Dr. Sue is doing some amazing things. That work needs to get out there. And they're helping orchestrate the right people to show up to you, the right work to come out, the right message to come out that helps lift all of humanity.
Mm-hmm. And so when you are referencing deities and states of consciousness and beings, can you just say more about that for everyone?
Yeah, so I think you teach this as well, that everything is energy. At the end of the day, we're all subject to influences of energies, right? At a very basic level, you could say we're human beings with bodies, bones, flesh, joints, but something is animating that, right? So when I say, "Hey, look at your hand," okay, you're looking at a hand, but you did the looking. So there's some energy, there's some energetic thing that's beyond your physical body. There's a subtle body or a pranic body, you could say. And in the Vedic astrology tradition, we start to see that these energetic layer of our being is influenced by the energetic layer of stars and planets. So planets, we say, oh, there's just a rock in space, rocks and gas, but they have an energetic layer. So a human being is not just flesh and bones, there's an energetic layer. A planet is just not rocks and gas, there's an energetic layer. And so the planets have energy that then influence us, and we interact with those energies. Our own body has energetic systems that are mapped into nadis and chakra systems, right? So the yoga tradition is a practice of activating that energetic body in you to make you more sensitive to commune with these other energy systems in the universe. Same thing, there are other lokas or planes of existence, right? We have our human earthly plane, but there's other planes too. There's planes of semi-divine beings. There's planes of where our ancestors are. There are planes where deities reside, and we can tap into those energies. And what's interesting, in the Indian tradition, we use sound a lot of times to connect to those energies. There are mantras, right? If I say there's a deity, Ganesh, who is the remover of obstacles, and I want some obstacles removed and I want him to come around, he's literally got a phone number. You can dial that phone number. It's Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. That resonates. He hears that energy, and then energetically you get some removal of obstacles on your journey. So I would say that most of the tradition is actually working with energies and recognizing energies and how to, you know, manage them in the best way possible.
So I see that as, and I have studied in ashrams in India, and I spent many years going back and forth and working with deep teaching here in the U.S. from teachers from India as well. It's been, I don't, it's been a large part of the last, 20 years of my life, and as such, I've been connecting in with the deities and teach about the Hindu gods and goddesses as well. And I see them as states of consciousness, not necessarily a being that is sitting there that I'm going to talk to or that's going to talk to me, but it's a level of consciousness that I can have access to, that that we've all been invited into, from whether it is from Brahma or Vishnu or any of Shiva or the consorts that go, the masculine and feminine balancings of all of that. It's a state of consciousness that I can elevate to if I deepen in my own consciousness, in my own true self, and anchor and integrate. Then I have access to higher and higher states, all, including Buddhic consciousness and Christed consciousness, and all the way to complete unity consciousness. And so, what's your take on that? How do you feel about Ganesh in the world, or a Vishnu, or a Shiva, for
Yeah.
instance?
So we kind of have to go back a little bit in so Hinduism is a religion, and it spawned from the Vedic tradition that was far older, right? So you could say the Vedic tradition might be a 6,000-year-old tradition, and then Hinduism came about 4,000 years ago as a derivative of that tradition. So the Hindus and their practices have a lot of similarity to the Vedic system, but the
Hmm.
Vedic people had their own sort of gods that don't even aren't even worshipped anymore, right? There's modern versions of it. And the Vedic people believed that this concept of God was completely unknowable to the human mind. These things that we're talking about, consciousness, energy, they're really hard for an average person to get their head around. But we're really good at personifying things, right? If we make it like a kind of a person looking thing, then we get it, right? So if I say, oh, Shiva is this deity that's in heaven and is meditating, sitting cross legged, and he's meditating, then you get that. You get that picture. So we human form or humanify, human form it in order to make it relatable to us. But it is a consciousness at the end of the day. It's a consciousness that we can't quite describe. And they believe that ultimately the divine is Brahman, which is unknowable, unfathomable, undescribable. It's something beyond. And as human beings, we want to tap into that energy. We want to tap into that consciousness. And then we tap in and become one with that supreme energy. But how do we get there becomes a question. And the Vedic system said all paths are fine. Doesn't matter how you get there. You get there any which way you want. You can personify a deity, non-personify. You can meditate on a form, a non-form. It doesn't matter. You can meditate, you can sing, you can do whatever. There's many, many different paths to get there. And so what the Hindus do, and the Vedic tradition also suggests, is you can personify like a Shiva, and you might put a Shiva form on your altar, and you might start chanting Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, and offering incense and candles and flowers, and working with this deity. And in your mind, you're like, that deity exists, and I'm communing and talking back and forth to that deity. But what's actually happening is you're activating that very consciousness in yourself. You're using the sort of pretend in your mind as a way to activate that very consciousness in yourself, because that consciousness exists in you. So every one of those deities is an energetic signature or pattern of consciousness that actually exists in you, and you're activated in yourself. So it's not about knowing that deity, it's about becoming that deity. And as you become that, you transcend the deity itself. So if you keep worshiping Shiva and working with it, eventually you get beyond Shiva. You go beyond Shiva and you go to this unknowable Brahman connection. So that's what we're doing here, is actually we're tricking ourselves to leapfrog beyond form into the formless.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Beautiful. Now you're singing my song.
Yes.
Okay. Fabulous. Fabulous to hear that you are aligned in this way. It's I'm sure our listeners are very happy to hear
Yeah.
the entire interrelationship between self and source, and this creator creating a creation. It's all one thing, and we
Yeah.
are that.
And
And
we are that.
we
Exactly.
are
We are
that.
that. But we don't know how to access it without these sort of, you could say, tricks or techniques or
Mhm.
practices. And so a lot of the Vedic systems require some kind of practice, right? A daily sadhana, they call it. It's daily sadhana, daily practice, your meditation practice, your chanting practice, your worship practice, whatever it is, your yoga practice, your walking practice, all of those things, those daily things that you do are ways that you daily connect to that spirit, that source that you imagine is out there, but you realize is in here.
Hmm. I think that it's such a fine line because it draws us, it gives an organization to something that is formless. It brings it into, a shape, something that we can process with our linearity, in a way our minds are trained to operate so far. And and then at some point it becomes a captor. It actually generates a limitation when we continue to. I'm just thinking about the word God overall, that we've humanized a God as a person sitting on a throne who's creating judgments and deciding, things, etc. When actually it can also be looked at as this infinite, this unified field, and we are moving up higher and higher frequencies all the while as we are embodying along the way. And when we remove the human face from God, it's actually much more embraceable. It's much more accessible. And I find that people become less afraid of this God who's going to judge them and, damn them to hell instead of invite them into their heavens. And so, it's the same kind of idea. It's like if we could just take get in alignment with the use of these forms and the faces that we've placed upon things, but to have a recognition that we're not to get lost in that story, that it's a guide and it's an as if, it's something to point us toward. It's not the ultimate expression of what is possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an intermediary. It's a stepping stone to something greater, and so you don't get too lost in it. Realize that there's something beyond, but ultimately you connect in an energy that is beyond form, beyond human description, beyond human personification of that form. It's something beyond, and so that's what all these teachings have been about. Is using your own energetic body to commune with those higher energies. But it just depends where somebody's at, right? As well. Like, everybody's in a different place. Some people are in the, like we started our conversation out, they're in the business of keeping up with the Joneses. So that's just where they are. And at some point they bubble out of that. So in some ways, religion is that keeping up with the Joneses. You stay with, here's a system, you go to the church, you follow what they say, you do this. But at some point, you'll bubble out of that. And when you bubble out of that, then you start coming into this bigger consciousness based understanding of the universe.
Mhm. Indeed, indeed. So, we're living in a world that is so productivity and performance oriented and externalizing our power and trying to figure out who we're supposed to become and how do we fit in and, where's this go? And how do you recommend that people, begin to embody this deeper truth? We know that the body tells the truth, that the body is a meeting ground in which all these concepts can actually animate and organize and integrate. What do you do to help people in that fashion?
Yeah, so I mean, just a person who is a regular meditator, a regular practitioner of yoga, is already opening and receiving and understanding themselves in a lot better way. But then I came across Vedic astrology, and that's where everything changed for me because when I looked at my Vedic astrology chart and started to understand it, it was obvious what I was supposed to be doing all along. It was just like it's right there. It's like written, it's there. And so for me, the tool has been Vedic astrology, where when I look at somebody's birth chart, it reveals a lot of what their deeper karmas are, what their dharma is, what their direction in life is, and how far off track they've gotten. And the concept is that the soul chooses its birth. And so your soul is highly intelligent, fully connected with the divine, and the soul chooses a certain birth on earth. And when it comes, it goes through its journey of learning. It goes through its learning lessons. And that moment that the soul takes human form, it takes its first breath out of the mother's womb. At that moment, if I can map the heavens and say, okay, at the moment you took your first breath, when you came out of your mother, what star constellation was rising on the eastern horizon? What stars were in what location in the sky? What planets were where? That gives me an insight or a clue into what your soul's syllabus was. What was the karmic blueprint this soul was trying to work through? And if we have a big enough ego, which many of us do, we can take that journey and go completely the different direction. Right? So the soul is trying to go a certain direction, and our ego pulls us and we push ourselves in a completely different path. And the astrologer is able to say, wait a minute, this is the direction you're actually intended to go in. Like my chart shows that I was here to be a spiritual teacher. I'm here this lifetime to teach the spiritual traditions. And how did my ego pull me so far off track to aim to be a CEO of a business? Right? So that becomes obvious in the birth chart. So you can kind of start to see what are the energetic circumstances and what was your soul intending to do, and how do we now make that correction? So a lot of times when somebody's feeling that like something doesn't feel right, and when I look at their chart and I say, well, this is actually the direction that your soul is trying to go, usually the answer is, I knew that all along. I knew that. All the signs are pointing that direction, but my ego just pushed me in a different place. And when I say the word ego, I'm talking about the sort of the mind and how our conditioned mind tells us what we think we should be doing when our deeper energetic layer is telling us, no, that's not the right path.
Mhm. So, do you think that you wasted time going into your education and your corporate affiliation and the skills that, were there? Do you feel like you missed out or
Well, there's a
wasted time?
time, right? There's a timing for everything, right? And so there are certain lessons have to be learned. So
Mhm.
let's say I had gone to an astrologer 20 years ago. They would have said, look, your path is going to shift and it's going to happen around this time. Because you can see it quite clearly in the chart. Like, okay, this is the time it'll shift.
Mhm.
But you have to go through that journey of that learning. So I think what would have changed for me is I probably would have stayed on the same path, but I would have always been more aware and comfortable when things didn't work out the way I wanted them to. Right? When I wanted that promotion, it didn't quite come the way I wanted it to come. I would have said, you know what, this is part of the grand plan. It's okay. Instead of all the heartache and emotional trouble I went through. So I think it's good to know the weather forecast, right? If you're going to go out and you want to have a nice day at the beach and it's going to rain, it's nice to be emotionally prepared for that. Versus you pack everything up, you get the umbrella, you sit on the beach, you're ready to relax in the sun, all of a sudden it starts pouring on you and you're just so upset when he kind of knew it was coming. So I'd say it's almost like a karmic weather forecast that you can't shortcut the system. You can't, I couldn't have become a coach 20 years ago. It wasn't the right timing for my particular development, right? So it's not wasted time. It's time that you learn. What was wasted was all the emotions and all the drama that I went through thinking, why isn't it working out this way? You know?
Unless that was burning up the karma right there when you're in the frustration and feeling it and being in the grit of all that. If it's honing you and refining you in some way, that's okay too. But I
Sure.
completely get it.
Yeah.
It's almost unfathomable to think that we are astrologically describable, that we are mathematically determinable. If you just let me play with these words for a moment, it's true. We come in here and the entire universe can be mathematically described, explained, and the entire reality that we are experiencing fits together inside of those equations. And astrology allows for us to knit that together and have an understanding of what is happening and approach it from even an intellectual standpoint just by learning what those who have come before us knew and charted and laid out for us. And so we can come and study such things and then pay that forward for people who are struggling and not knowing how to handle what's going on. I always say, by all means, reach out to learn and to be guided, and at the same time have what you're having. You're not wasting your time. You didn't make wrong decisions. It's all in a divine order. All of it. It's all in a divine order. So I think that you were drawn into the corporate world in the way that you were, seemingly innocuously, just, because that's what you knew and it's what was happening in the world and that was the thing to do. But I also know that skills are honed along the way and things are developed that allow you to help people right now bridge the worlds of performance in the world and deep spiritual understanding of who we are, because we have to take that spirituality out into the world and infuse it into systems that work and improve systems that don't work. And I think that you're poised perfectly to be a person who can facilitate the bridging of those worlds. That's what I'm trying to get around to here.
Yeah, I
And
think that bridging is there, and I think you're 100% right that based on an astrology chart, you can map. There's a mathematical mapping, but also don't want to rest and say it's deterministic that this is what will happen and that's it.
right.
These are energetic patterns, right? These are energies. So we're forecasting different energies that are prevalent in different people, but you have agency to manage those energies.
Hmm.
And so sometimes I think of myself as a karma manager. We're managing karma. Karma is like, these things that you're going to go through, energetically speaking, that show up in different ways in human experience, right? So Mars, for instance, is an energy that's a warrior, angry, fighting, kind of pushing, courageous. It's an energy signature. Now,
Yeah.
how does Mars show up in a human being's life? Well, it can show up as anger, it can show up as courage, it can show up as being a warrior fighting for justice, it can show up as a car accident, it can show up as blood. I mean, so many different ways. But that energy is coming through, but you can manage it. You have some agency on how to manage how it shows up. The energy, you can't just say go away. You can say, okay, I want the rain to stop now. But you can say, you know what, I'm going to wear an umbrella today, or I'm going to wear a raincoat, or you know what, I'm going to delay construction till the rain clears. So thinking about it as energetic forecasting and energetic management, where you do have agency, the energies are determined, but the way they show up can be shifted based on your own personal practices.
100%. Totally agree with that. And thank you so much for, just weaving things together in the ways that you are. I think it's very beautiful for people to realize that there's a system at play and that we are free to integrate and manage inside of that system in whatever way we truly feel drawn to. And, it's ours to become aware of what is available to us and then to truly trust that we can feel our way into what's next for us.
That's
So,
right.
you know,
And the remedies, so Vedic astrology, one of the very powerful things about it is it's full of remedies. We call them remedies, but the remedies are usually connected to the yoga tradition. They're connected to doing work on your energetic system. So meditation is one of the most powerful remedies in general for astrologers. So if you have a challenging chart, meditate, one of the best ways to fix something, or start doing yoga practice, or start doing, simple things, or things that you are already teaching, Dr. Sue, are actually part of the remedial system or remedies of the astrology world.
hmm yes, the truth finds its way
Yeah,
to reveal. That's just what happens in the world, and it's such a beautiful thing when we can find all the ways that can work for us and integrate them together. For someone who's listening, who maybe feels disconnected right now, maybe they're successful externally, things are working, but internally they feel something like, I don't know, an exhaustion or an uncertainty, and they're searching for anything deeper or more fulfilling. What's a simple first step that they can take to see real change in your world?
so one of the things that I started working on was this idea that, I'm a DIYer. I'm from, I lived in the Midwest for a long time. I lived in Detroit in the auto industry, and I learned to do my own plumbing and my own drywall and, DIY. So I hate this idea of always having to go to somebody for help, right? And that's what I found in the astrology world, that you always have to find an astrologer to figure out your chart. And it just feels exhausting. Like, why do I have to depend on this person? Is the person safe? Do I trust them with my whole, deeper X-ray vision into my karma? And so what I started, my thesis with Astrology Decoded was, if you just know your rising sign, if you just know that, and you work on the planet that's behind that, that changes everything. It's almost like a rising tide lifts all ships.
Mhm.
So what I encourage people to do is figure out your Vedic birth chart. And there's free chart calculators out there. In fact, if you go to my vishchatterji.com, there's a free calculator. You don't have to enter your email or anything. It just calculates it for you. So what you'll calculate is the moment you were born, the time of birth, the place of birth, the date of birth. What was that zodiac sign? There's 12 zodiac signs. And out of those 12 signs, they're each ruled by a certain planet. So for instance, Aries is ruled by Mars, Taurus is ruled by Venus, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, Cancer, like we said today, is ruled by the moon. Figure out that ruling planet and just work on that one planet. Just that one planet. Do something that energetically harmonizes that energy. So for instance, if it's Mars, you probably need to do some exercise that gets a sweat on. Like Mars is a soldier, train like a soldier. Go and get a sweat on once, a few times a week. That's a remedy for Mars. Saturn is a planet that likes to see discipline. Get organized. Organize your stuff. Go for a walk on Saturn's day, which happens to be Saturday. Saturn's day is Saturday. If it's the sun, then take care of your father, or do some work where you get out there and get on a stage and speak and shine your light. If it's Mercury, start doing some writing or some speaking. If it's Venus, start playing some music. Just simple things that planet's sort of energetic code is activated when you do that planet's activity. So that's what I would suggest is the first easy step is know the rising sign that was there on the eastern horizon at the moment you're born, know the planet that was behind it, and know that planet's energetic sort of activity that connects to that energy.
The characteristics of that energy. Yeah.
Exactly.
So fascinating. We know that there are areas of the brain that are particularly associated with each of the planets, and areas inside of in the internal workings of the cell. The structure internally are also directly associated with different planetary alignments, or different planets. And so as there's a constant movement, it's changing us on every level, cellularly, intercellularly, in our chemistries, in our entire disposition. So it's so wonderful to connect with you, and so wonderful to share you with our audience. What one thing would you want people to remember about our entire conversation about awakening and about the Vedic tradition and astrology, et cetera? If you could just sum it up, what would you love for people to walk away with?
So I would say the one thing I would say to walk away with is, first of all, get out of your head and do something every morning that communes with the divine, however you see the divine. Whatever vision, perspective, form, system that you have in your own practice, do that every morning. And whether it's a 5-minute thing, a 20-minute thing, a 30-minute, an hour, whatever you have available, maybe it's a 3-minute thing, spend 3-5 minutes every morning somehow communing with your sense of the divine. Whether that's a prayer for a few minutes, it's a meditation, a worship, a chant, a journaling exercise, sitting quietly, sitting in nature and staring at a tree, whatever it is, but make it a daily thing and don't skip a day.
Beautiful. I'll have that. I absolutely love that. It's a must. There's been a year, just the year that I've just been through has been probably the most demanding. We were just being invited to do so many things, and publishing a book and all of that. A lot that went in with all of that. And there were probably more moments this year that I would not involve myself in as much of my practices. Yogi for 25 years now, very devoted, dedicated to it. More days that I did not get on the mat than ever in the last 20 years. And I certainly felt the impact of that. And so I cannot agree with you more than to say that we just have to stay plugged in to the truth of who we are.
Yeah, a daily reminder of staying plugged into the truth. And I tell people all the time, you're supposed to brush your teeth 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. But what if you said, you know what? I'm too busy. Let me just brush my teeth on Saturdays for 20 minutes. Does that work?
Yeah, no.
It doesn't, right? So it's the same thing. You have to brush the mind, brush the soul
Yeah,
on a
absolutely.
daily basis. And if you
Yeah.
miss a day, then you build up plaque,
Yeah.
and that plaque becomes hard to clean.
Indeed, indeed. So, Vish, tell us how our listeners can connect with you, with your work.
So I have a website, vishchatterji.com, VISHCHATTERJI.com. And on there, like I said, is a free chart calculator. You can calculate your birth chart. My book recently that came out about a year ago is Astrology Decoded. And in there, there's actually all the planets are described, all the remedies for each planet described. So if you pull your chart and look at that, you can easily do something in your life that'll shift things. And of course, if you want to do any deeper work, then I have a coaching practice. I'm available. But vishchatterji.com is probably the first jumping point to figure out what I do.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we will have this information in the show notes, of course, for everyone. Thank you so much, Vish, for who you are and for taking a stand, for listening to that deep truth and allowing it to emerge and to have a place to live and breathe. As at the soulful level is the truth of who we are and why we came. And so thank you for being a model of that in the world today for us. All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Sue. And thank you for not running away to an ashram and hiding from the world. We need your work. And you've obviously done so many amazing things for people. So thank you for that and for having me.
My joy, my joy. Wonderful to share this space on the planet with you. All right. And also want to thank our listeners for spending this time with us on the Art of Awakening podcast, where we're blending science and spirituality to create a life that we truly love living. And so that we can model for the rest of the world what it is like when we do drop in and discover a deeper path, a deeper way, and walk out into the world as that fulfillment. And so until next time, I'm Dr. Sue Morter. Blessings to you all. Bye-bye for now. Namaste.